And and what Ben is doing, we just find so many people are doing to just really, step out of their lives and what we're doing right now in their jobs, and people who've taken early retirements in order to capture this wave, this incredibly perfect storm of a moment that we're in, where we so badly need to change what's going on. We are at the breaking point for people and the planet and the economy and our democracy in no uncertain terms. But it also is this incredibly unprecedented, staggering moment where we have just a potential to change that I certainly have never seen in my lifetime, to where people are really breaking away from establishment politics, and the spirit of democracy and justice are breaking out all over the world and all over the country. And from the democracy revolutions in the Middle East to the uprising in Wisconsin, which still lives on. Let's hear it for Wisconsin. To the Occupy protests all over the country, which also live on. To the student strikes, to stop tuition hikes and to fight for public higher education that should be free as it was intended to be. And for bailing out the students, not the banks. We should be breaking up the banks and bailing out the students. And the eviction blockades and the Keystone Pipeline civil disobedience, which is going on right now in Texas. Let's hear it for those incredibly brave people on Keystone. So, there is that social movement that's going on right now, and it deserves a voice in this election and a choice at the polls that's not bought and paid for by Wall Street, because walking into the voting booth and voting for either Wall Street-sponsored candidate basically gives them a mandate for 4 more years of the same, and that is the very definition of throwing away your vote. So in this campaign, we are calling for what the American people are actually clamoring for in poll after poll by large majorities. And it's been so exciting because many of us know who've been working on the Green Party and building the party for many years that we've been ahead of the curve. We've been ahead of the curve on green energy and on climate action and on peaceful, nonviolent conflict resolution. And on local economies, and on healthy, organic, sustainable food systems. Yeah, all those great things. We've been ahead of the curve, but now suddenly the curve has just caught up with us unbelievably. So what we're talking about now is what the American people really want in poll after poll. People are calling for jobs, not just tax breaks for corporations and the wealthy, but instead creating actual jobs here and now, which is what we're calling for with the Green New Deal. And as you know, this is not just a hypothetical idea, it's actually a plan based on what worked in the 1930s to get us out of the Great Depression. So it's based on the New Deal. It'll create 25 million jobs, put an end to unemployment, and jumpstart the green economy. And the great thing about that is that it puts a halt to climate change, and it makes wars for oil obsolete. How about that? And it puts resources and power into the hands of communities to create the jobs that we need at the community level, and every community decides for themselves what it is. We provide national funding about the size of the last stimulus package, but instead of creating just 2 million jobs, we can create 25 million jobs because it actually puts the money directly into job creation. The stimulus package, it did create some directly, but it also created a lot of tax breaks. And unfortunately, tax breaks don't create jobs for all kinds of reasons. So very expensive, didn't do the job, but we can do that now. And the Green New Deal will create public works and public services so that you can actually go down to your employment office. Instead of going to your unemployment office, you can actually go down to an employment office and get a job if you're out of work. It also provides for startup money and grants and incentives for small businesses, community-based small businesses, and worker cooperatives to also create jobs in the green economy with clean renewable energy, healthy local organic food production, public transportation, clean manufacturing, and as well as all the social needs that communities need in order to be really sustainable for teachers, after school, child care, home care, affordable housing, drug abuse prevention and rehab, and all that. So it's a broad spectrum of jobs, and it's a win-win on the climate, on the economy, and on making wars a thing of the past. Because if you don't need that dirty oil, then there's no excuse to be fighting those wars on foreign shores. And that frees up hundreds of billions of dollars to actually pay for the Green New Deal and more. We're also calling for health care as a human right through Medicare for all. And as you probably know, it provides comprehensive coverage, covers all of you, as well as covering everybody. And it puts you back in charge of your healthcare decisions instead of having your employer say what they will or won't cover, and instead of having some profiteering CEO decide how they're, basically going to make money off of you and profiteer off your health care. Instead, you get to make the decisions, not them, and it saves us trillions of dollars over the next decade. So you got a choice here. They're trying to say austerity to solve these problems. Well, it turns out Medicare for all could solve just as much debt as the austerity programs that they're proposing. So between austerity and healthcare as a human right, how would you like to solve the debt? How about it? Okay, let's hear it for healthcare. Really, why not? What a no-brainer. And we're calling for education also as a human right. And that means from preschool through college education, that is tuition free as something we provide to the younger generation. And we know that it pays for itself. We know that from the GI Bill, when for every dollar that taxpayers put into college education for the returning GIs after World War II, for every dollar we invested, we got $7 back in economic benefits. So it more than pays for itself. There's no reason in the world not to go there. And while we're at it, instead of bailing out the banks, it's time to bail out the students. You probably know you may not have, depends how closely, how much of a news junkie you are, but in the last week, the Federal Reserve announced it was undertaking another of these so-called quantitative easing programs where the Fed buys out the banks yet again, as if doing it for a third time is going to solve the problem when the first 2 times didn't. So we're saying instead of bailing out the banks who got us into this mess with their waste, fraud, and abuse, how about instead we do a quantitative easing for the students and we bail out the students and put an end to student debt? And finally, let's see, 2 things. One is that we want to downsize the military, cut it back to year 2000 levels. It's been doubled. We're not twice as secure. Exactly. In fact, we're less secure for having this brute militarism, this knee-jerk military force that is being exercised now as the president expanded the war from Iraq, surged the troops into Afghanistan, intensified the bombing in Pakistan on day 3 of his administration. Where were the Republicans that were forcing him to do that 4 years ago? You know, this was the Obama agenda, unfortunately. And then to expand the drone wars into Somalia and Yemen, and now they're talking about North Africa. Meanwhile, they're building bases around China, new bases, and the president has promised to spend $600 billion creating a whole new generation of nuclear weapons and modes of delivery. So we're standing up to say, no, thank you. Let's stop that new and dangerous arms race and this hyper-militarism that's making us less secure. If you just take a look at all the blowback around the Middle East that's happening right now, from the shooting of our soldiers by the Afghanis that they're supposed to be training, by the Afghani soldiers, to the unrest in Libya and actually all over the Middle East, the protests against the U.S. government and U.S. embassies right now. You know, it's clear that dropping bombs on weddings and funerals, like the drones have been doing, has not been a good way to win the hearts and minds of the Middle East. So we're going to bring the troops home and downsize the military and change our foreign policy from brute military force to international law and human rights. That is the road to international security. And finally, let me say, especially here in Colorado, since you have a referendum coming up on this, we're also calling for the legalization of cannabis and hemp. Because, as you know, marijuana and cannabis is a substance which is dangerous because it's illegal. It's not illegal on account of being dangerous. Because it's not dangerous. Exactly. I can say that with all the authority of an MD because it's actually true. And on day 1 in office, what a Green president could do if she wanted would be something really radical, and that is to instruct the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, to actually use science in determining what substances are going to be listed and which aren't. Because if science was used, there would be no scientific basis for making cannabis and hemp scheduled substances. On the first day in office, the president could also instruct the EPA to actually start protecting the environment. And could instruct, and that means to say no to more to fracking, to more offshore drilling, to opening up our national parks and the Arctic, and no to nuclear power plants and a whole new generation this president is trying to build. And on the first day, the president can also say to the federal communications system that it's time to open up the public airwaves for use by the public. And that means creating a level playing field for all candidates, whether they have billions of dollars to buy TV advertising time or not. It's a level playing field for all candidates. The minute you do that, money goes out of politics because it won't do them any good anymore. We don't have to wait for Congress to pass a bill because the president actually has the authority to instruct the FCC to do that now. And that fundamentally means basically the end game for money in politics once media is turned back and the public airwaves are turned back to the public for equal use for qualified candidates. So. And the other thing, just to mention one last thing, the other thing that the president can do on day one is to start being not simply a commander-in-chief, but an organizer-in-chief. Because imagine what if, you remember hearing about the SOPA bill, the Stop Online Piracy Act, which was going to censor the internet. Okay, so word got out about this. It was considered a slam dunk. There was no way we were going to stop it, except that word leaked out. And when word leaked out, guess what? People were able to stop it because they had time to get in touch with their senators and say, no how, no way, don't you mess with my internet. It is our country. So just imagine if it was our democracy, because the president is in a position to basically be the whistleblower on Congress and to let people know every time an important bill is coming up, whether it should be a thumbs up or a thumbs down and why it would serve the public interest or not, and turn it over to the American people to actually talk to their elected officials, their legislators, their congressmen and women and their senators, and let them know why we need to bail out the students and break up the banks and bring the troops home and make public higher education for free and create health care as a human right and all that. Because if the public knew and could weigh in, we could actually pass these bills in the same way that the public was able to do the right thing on the SOPA bill. This should be the rule and not the exception for how Congress works. So last thing, I just want to emphasize what an incredibly, like beyond my wildest dreams campaign this has been. I got into it thinking this would be the hardest campaign that I've ever been a part of in my life, but it's actually been exactly the opposite. This campaign has been like handing out candy at Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever, because people are so hungry for what it is that we're offering. 90 million voters are estimated to be staying home this election because they know that neither Barack Obama nor Mitt Romney are going to serve them. They're not going to solve problems. They don't have a new idea in their brain. It's all about rerunning what isn't working. In fact, what's driving us in the wrong direction. So, and that's twice as many voters as are coming out to vote for either Mitt Romney or Barack Obama. Twice as many are voting with their feet to say that those corporate-sponsored candidates are not going to do it for us. So what does that mean? Or consider this. There are 36 million students and recent graduates who are basically indentured servants who do not have a future. This is like what created the momentum for the democracy revolutions in the Middle East. Basically the same thing. We could actually have our own Tahrir Square, our own Tunisia could be happening right here and right now if we can get the word out to the people who want to make the change that we're talking about. We can do that. We can do that. And one of the ways we can do that, it is in our hands. So it means going to our website, getting on Facebook, getting on Twitter, getting on the internet, and alerting your network that there really is a solution. I did a broadcast for C-SPAN 3 days ago, and the guy behind the camera, when he was done, said to me, "Wow, I've never heard anything like that before. I guess I have a reason now to go and register to vote." And I mean, we just hear this over and over again, that there are so many people who are hungering for what we've got. So it's all about getting the word out, and it's all about pitching in where you can. So that means signing up to volunteer, to do phone banking, to be canvassing, etc. We're just now, because we've been tied up in knots by design. If you're a true opposition party and you're not on the ballot, you're going to spend 90% of your campaign just getting on the ballot. But now, here we are. We're on the ballot for 85% of voters. Thank you for making that happen. We got federal matching funds for the first time, making history. And our challenge now is to fulfill the promise of the first 10 months of the campaign. By having made history in this way, we can fulfill the promise of this campaign if we can run a full-fledged campaign right now. So we're asking you, if you're able to make a contribution of whatever amount you can do that here tonight. You can also do it on the web. I'll let Ben maybe say a few more words about that. But I just want to put in the pitch for how much we can accomplish if we now drive this home. If we can raise for this last part of the campaign, for the general, the amount that we raised in the primary, which was about $500,000, that would enable us to basically hire the staff to really do the outreach, to mobilize the networks, the students, the homeless, the people who are facing foreclosure, the peace movement, which is really clamoring for a true peace candidate, the climate movement, which is desperate for a real climate candidate. For us to be able to get the word out, there are leaders and people of courage in all these movements who are ready to stand up to that politics of fear and to say no, that the politics of fear has brought us everything we were afraid of. It's time to stand up and lead the way with the politics of courage, and that's what our campaign is. If we have a fully funded campaign, and we can do it, on a bare bones budget, if we have that, and we can bring in, say we got nothing more than just the students, 36 million students, we could turn this election on its head. With 36 million students, they don't need convincing. They just need to know that we're here. Same thing for people facing foreclosure. They just need to know that they have the option. Same thing for people, facing a climate disaster, who know that the Obama and Romney, neither of them are, they're both just driving us over the cliff. So by getting the word out, we can bring in enough votes that who knows what we could do. One thing we can do that is definitely to lock in where we are now. And we've come from undetectable to 1% to 2%. That is a huge achievement. And thank you all for making that happen. We can lock that in, but if we can go a little bit further, one possibility is that we could double that again, plus some, and get to 5%, which is a very hard thing to do. The system is, perfectly designed to prevent that from happening, but we can build on our success. If we get to 5%, that means we can hit the ground running in every election now for the next 4 years, because we will have ballot status. We don't have to spend the first 90% of a campaign getting on the ballot. We can do it from the very beginning. And the other thing it does is unleash a $20 million grant from the federal government for being a real major party. Just imagine, we've been able to do this with $500,000 basically, and maybe $1 million if we can double that. But imagine if we started off the next race with a $20 million grant and we're on the ballot. It'll just be a whole new world of political possibility going forward. And we can drive home the solutions that are at hand, that our campaign represents. And for us to bring the Green New Deal into the public debate, healthcare is a human right through Medicare for all, public higher education, bailing out the students and downsizing the military and legalizing cannabis and hemp, it's going to be a whole new ball game. Those ideas will take on a life of their own if we're able to simply drive them forward into the limelight. So if we win the White House and turn it into a greenhouse, that's a great thing for the world. It'll be a better place. But we can also win the day by simply moving these solutions forward and turning this breaking point we face into the tipping point we need to take back our democracy and the future we deserve. Thank you all so much for making it happen.